Chapter 1. Blood in the moonlight forest had no mercy for the wounded. Alara stumbled through the underbrush. One hand pressed against the gash along her ribs, the other, grasping at tree trunks to keep herself upright. Blood soaked through her dress, the pale blue silk that had seemed so elegant hours ago. Before the dinner party, before the accusations, before Malcolm's hand had struck her face, and his brother's knife had found her side, before she'd run, the moon hung fat and silver overhead, casting the autumn woods in shades of pewter and shadow. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Behind her, somewhere in the dark, she could hear them, Malcolm's hunting dogs, their baying carrying through the crisp night air like promises of violence. She'd been a fool to think she could escape. Malcolm Ashford didn't lose things he considered his property. And after 3 months of courtship, 3 months of his cold eyes watching her every move, his possessive hand on her waist at every social gathering, he'd made it clear what he thought she was, his. The ground gave way beneath her feet. Alara cried out as she tumbled down a steep embankment, branches tearing at her dress, rocks scraping her palms. She landed hard at the bottom, the impact driving the air from her lungs. For a moment, she could only lie there in the dirt and dead leaves, listening to the dogs drawing closer. Get up or die here. She forced herself to her hands and knees, then to her feet. The world tilted dangerously. She'd lost too much blood. The knife wound burned with every breath, every movement. Still, she staggered forward, deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thick and ancient, where the moonlight barely penetrated the canopy overhead. The dogs fell silent. Alara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. That wasn't better. Silence meant they'd found her trail. Silence meant Malcolm and his men were close. A branch snapped behind her. She whirled, her vision swimming with the sudden movement. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, tall, dark, perfectly still. Not Malcolm. This man was broader through the shoulders, his bearing different. He wore all black, his coat cut in an old-fashioned style she couldn't quite place. Please, Alara whispered, hating the desperation in her voice. Please, I need help. They're hunting me. The man didn't move, didn't speak. In the darkness, she couldn't make out his features, only the pale outline of his face beneath dark hair. I have money, she tried again, though she had nothing but the dress on her back. My family, they'll pay you. Just help me hide. Just for tonight, you're bleeding. His voice cut through her rambling plea, low, controlled, with an edge to it that raised the hairs on the back of her neck. Not cruel exactly, dangerous. I know. She swayed on her feet. I know, I just need. He moved. One moment he stood 10 feet away. The next, he was directly in front of her, close enough that she could see his face in the moonlight. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, eyes that caught the light like a cat's, reflecting it back in shades of gold and amber. Beautiful, terrifying, inhuman. Who hurt you? The question came out soft, almost gentle. But underneath, Alara heard something ancient and furious, coiled tight. Tell me their name. She opened her mouth to answer. The world tilted sideways. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. Alara found herself gathered against a chest that didn't rise and fall with breath, supported by arms that felt like iron wrapped in silk. She should have been afraid. Some part of her was screaming that something was wrong, that men didn't move that fast, that eyes didn't shine like that. But she was so tired. And his hands, though cold, were gentle. Malcolm Ashford, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. The dogs, they're his. He said I betrayed him. He said he'd make sure everyone knew what I was. And what are you? The man's voice rumbled through his chest against her ear. Innocent. The word tasted bitter. Not that it matters. Not that anyone will believe. The baying of the hounds shattered the night. Closer now. Too close. The man holding her went utterly still. Alara felt the change in him, the way something predatory shifted behind his careful control. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something that wasn't quite human. How many are hunting you? 5, maybe 6. She tried to focus past the pain, past the darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. Malcolm and his men. They have guns. Dogs. I can't. There's nowhere left to run. You don't need to run. He adjusted his grip on her, lifting her fully into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. Not anymore. Alara wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to ask who what he was, but the blood loss was catching up to her, dragging her down into unconsciousness. Despite her best efforts to stay aware, the last thing she heard before the darkness took her was his voice. Cold and absolute as winter. I'll tear them apart. When the hunting party burst into the clearing 3 minutes later, guns raised and torches blazing, they found it empty. No sign of their quarry, no trail to follow, only Malcolm's best hound, lying dead at the base of an oak tree. Its throat torn out so cleanly that barely any blood had spilled, and carved into the bark above it, gouged deep by what could only have been claws, a symbol none of them recognized. 3 vertical lines crossed by a horizontal slash, the mark of House Blackthorn, the mark of a vampire who'd just claimed protection over prey that no longer belonged to mortal men. Chapter 2. The Sanctuary of Shadows. Elara woke to the scent of old stone and wood smoke. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, trying to orient herself. Not the forest. Not Malcolm's estate. Somewhere else entirely. The surface beneath her was soft a bed, she realized, with sheets that felt like silk against her skin. Above her, a ceiling rose into darkness, the stonework ancient and elaborate. She sat up slowly, wincing at the pull of her wound. Except there was no pain. Elara's hand flew to her side, fingers probing through the unfamiliar nightgown she now wore. Beneath the thin fabric, she could feel the ridge of a scar. Healed. Not fresh stitches or bandages, but a scar that looked weeks old. Impossible. The room came into focus as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. She was in a bedchamber that belonged to another century, all dark wood furniture and tapestries depicting scenes she didn't recognize. A fire burned low in an enormous hearth, providing the only illumination. No windows. No natural light at all. You're awake. Elara's head snapped toward the voice. He stood in the shadows near the door, the man from the forest. In the firelight, she could see him properly now. Tall and lean, with dark hair that fell just past his collar, and those strange amber eyes that seemed to hold their own light. He wore a simple white shirt and dark trousers, but carried himself like royalty. How long have I been here? Her voice came out rough, uncertain. 2 days. He didn't move from his position, maintaining the distance between them, as if he thought she might bolt. Your wound was significant. It required intervention. 2 days. Elara looked down at her side again, at the impossibly healed scar. What kind of intervention? The only kind that would save your life. He paused, and something flickered across his features. Concern, perhaps, or guilt. I gave you my blood. The words hung in the air between them. Elara's medical knowledge was limited to what any woman of her station might know, but she understood enough. Blood didn't heal like this. Wounds didn't close into days, leaving only scars behind, unless the blood wasn't human. You're the vampire, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. He inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement that held centuries of courtly grace. I am. My name is Lucian Blackthorn. And before you ask, no, my blood will not turn you. You would have to die with it in your system for that. You're still human. Still mortal. Simply healed. Lucian. The name fitted him somehow, old and elegant and dangerous. Malcolm's men, Elara said suddenly, memory flooding back. The dogs. Did you? I sent them away. His expression remained neutral, but she caught the edge in his voice. Unharmed mostly. I made it clear that you were under the protection of House Blackthorn. They won't come for you again. House Blackthorn. She tested the words, the strange symbol carved into the tree flashing through her mind. I don't understand. Why would you protect me? You don't even know me. For the first time, Lucian moved. He crossed to the hearth, his movements fluid and precise, lacking the small imperfections of human motion. He stared into the flames, his profile sharp and severe in the firelight. I know what it is to be hunted, he said finally. To be accused of crimes you didn't commit. To run until there's nowhere left to hide. He turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw something ancient and weary. You were bleeding in my forest, fleeing men who meant to kill you for the crime of saying no. I know injustice when I see it. Elara pulled her knees to her chest, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was alone in a vampire's sanctuary, wearing a nightgown she hadn't put on herself, her entire life in ruins behind her. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange sense of safety she couldn't explain. What did Malcolm tell people? She asked. About why I ran. Lucian's jaw tightened. That you stole from him. That you seduced his brother and conspired to ruin his family name. That you fled when confronted with evidence of your guilt. Each word landed like a blow. Elara closed her eyes, fighting back tears. And everyone believed him. He's a wealthy man from an old family. You're a woman with no family left and no fortune to speak of." Of course they believed him. The bitterness in Lucian's voice surprised her. "The world is built to believe men like Malcolm Ashford. You didn't." She opened her eyes, studying him. "You believed me. I didn't have to believe you." He moved closer, stopping at the foot of the bed, maintaining that careful distance. "I could smell the truth of it. Fear has a scent. So does a lie. You were afraid for your life. He was hunting you for sport, to punish you for daring to refuse him. That told me everything I needed to know." Silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Alara found the courage to ask what she needed to know. "What happens now?" "I can't go back. Malcolm's ruined my reputation. I have nowhere to go. No money. No." Her voice cracked. "Nothing." Lucian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words were measured, careful. "You stay here, under my protection, until we decide what comes next." "Here." Alara looked around the windowless chamber. "In your home?" "My sanctuary," he corrected gently. "These halls have stood for centuries. They're warded against intrusion, both mortal and immortal. Malcolm Ashford's reach doesn't extend into vampire territory. Here, you're safe, safe with a vampire." A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat. "A week ago, I thought vampires were stories to frighten children, and now I'm wearing a nightgown in a vampire's bed, with his blood healing my wounds." She met his gaze directly. "Now I think the monsters I should have feared were human all along." Something shifted in Lucian's expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He studied her with new intensity, as if seeing her properly for the first time. "Rest," he said finally, turning toward the door. "You're still recovering, even with accelerated healing. We'll talk more tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night," Alara repeated. "You sleep during the day." He paused in the doorway, glancing back over his shoulder. "The sun and I have an unfriendly relationship." "Yes." "And the blood?" She had to ask. "How do you, I mean, feed?" A slight smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Carefully, with consent, from willing donors who understand what they're offering." The smile faded. "I'm not Malcolm Ashford, Alara. I don't take what isn't freely given." He left before she could respond. The door closing softly behind him, Alara sat in the firelit darkness, processing everything that had happened. 2 days ago, she'd been running for her life. Now she was healed, safe, and under the protection of a vampire who looked at her like she was something precious, something worth saving. She touched the scar on her side again, feeling the ridge of healed tissue beneath her fingers. Whatever came next, there was no going back to the life she'd known, only forward, into the unknown shadows of a world she was just beginning to understand. Chapter 3. Nocturnal lesson. Seller awoke to find a tray beside her bed, bread, cheese, fruit, and a pot of tea still steaming. No one had entered. She would have heard the door. Yet there it sat, arranged with careful precision, on a small table that hadn't been there when she'd fallen asleep. Vampire magic, or simply vampire silence? She ate slowly, her mind turning over everything Lucian had told her. House Blackthorn, protection wards, blood that healed but didn't transform. Each answer had spawned a dozen new questions, and she'd spent half the night staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the impossible with what she'd witnessed. The fire had burned down to embers. She had no sense of time in this windowless room, no way to know if it was morning or evening in the world above. The isolation should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like a reprieve, a pause between the life she'd lost and whatever came next. A soft knock broke the silence. "Come in," Alara called, pulling the blanket higher. Though she was fully covered by the nightgown, the door opened, but it wasn't Lucian who entered. A young woman stepped inside, carrying an armful of clothing. She had auburn hair pinned in an elaborate style and wore a simple gray dress that marked her as household staff. Her eyes, when they met Alara's, were warm brown and entirely human. "Good evening, miss." The woman bobbed a small curtsy. "I'm Grace. Lord Blackthorn asked me to bring you something more suitable to wear, and to show you to the bathing chamber, if you'd like." Lord Blackthorn. The title sent a shiver through Alara. That had nothing to do with fear. "Thank you, Grace." Alara studied the young woman carefully. "You're human." "I am." Miss Grace set the clothing on a chair near the fire. "Have been all my life, and intend to stay that way." There was humor in her voice, gentle and knowing. "Lord Blackthorn doesn't believe in forced transformation. We're all here by choice." "We?" There are 6 of us in the household. Cook, 2 housemaids, a groundskeeper, a steward, and myself. We manage the estate and provide. She paused delicately. Other services when needed and when we consent to them. Blood. She meant blood. Elara's stomach twisted. Though she couldn't say if it was revulsion or curiosity that caused the sensation, Grace seemed to read her expression. It's not what you're imagining, miss. It's like giving blood to a hospital. Only Lord Blackthorn is far more careful about our health than any physician I've known. We're well compensated, well fed, and we can leave whenever we wish. Most of us have been here for years. Why? The question escaped before Elara could stop it. Why stay with a vampire? The young woman considered this, her head tilting thoughtfully. Because he's a better master than most mortal men I've served. Because he's honorable. Because he keeps his word and expects us to keep ours. She smiled. And because the wages are excellent. Practical reasons. Human reasons. Somehow that made it easier to accept than any romantic notion of vampire thrall or enchantment. Grace led Elara through corridors of stone and shadow, lighting the way with candles and brass holders. The estate was vast, far larger than Elara had imagined. They passed libraries and sitting rooms, a music chamber with a pianoforte that looked older than any she'd seen, and finally arrived at a bathing room that took her breath away. The chamber was built around a natural hot spring that steamed in the cool air. Someone had carved the stone into a pool, lined it with smooth tile, and surrounded it with candles. Towels and soaps waited on a nearby bench. Take your time, miss, Grace said. I'll wait outside to show you back when you're ready. Alone, Elara shed the nightgown and sank into the water. Heat enveloped her, easing muscles she hadn't realized were tense. She scrubbed away 2 days of unconsciousness, of blood and fear and forest dirt, until her skin felt raw and new. When she finally emerged, she found the clothing Grace had brought, a simple dress in deep burgundy, well made but not ostentatious. It fit perfectly, as if tailored for her body. Unsettling that, had Lucian assessed her measurements while she slept? Had Grace? Stop it, she told herself firmly. You're alive. You're safe. Stop looking for threats and kindness. Grace showed her to a dining room where more food waited, a proper meal this time, with meat and vegetables and wine. Elara ate alone, wondering where Lucian was. If he was watching from the shadows, or if he'd truly given her space to adjust. She was finishing the last of the wine when he appeared in the doorway. You look better, Lucian observed, his gaze traveling over her in a way that was assessing rather than invasive. The color suits you. Your staff is very efficient. Elara set down her glass, proud that her hand didn't shake. I have questions. I expected you would. He moved into the room, but didn't sit, instead leaning against the mantelpiece with that preternatural grace. Ask. The mark you carved into the tree. House Blackthorn. What does that mean? It means you're under my protection, according to vampire law. No other immortal can touch you without answering to me. It's an old custom, from before your great-grandparents were born. His expression was unreadable. It's binding until I release you or you choose to leave my territory. Territory. Elara absorbed this. How much territory? These hills and the forest beyond. Approximately 20 square miles. He paused. You're free to move within it. The wards will keep Malcolm's men out, and any vampire who sees my mark will know to keep their distance. 20 square miles. It sounded vast, but she heard what he wasn't saying. She was still trapped, just in a prettier cage than Malcolm had offered. You said there were other vampires, she ventured. Other houses. 7 major houses in this region, each with territory, laws, and alliances that shift like sand. Lucian's voice took on a lecturing quality, as if he were teaching her a lesson she needed to survive. House Blackthorn is old, but small. We keep to ourselves, honor the old codes. Other houses are more ambitious. Ambitious? How? His jaw tightened. Some believe humans are cattle, others see them as toys. A few houses maintain the old ways: mutual respect, consent, coexistence. But we're outnumbered by those who view mortals as lesser creatures. Fear trickled down Elara's spine. And Malcolm? Does he know what you are? No, very few mortals do. Lucian's gaze sharpened. Which brings me to a difficult subject. You can't go back to human society, Elara. Not as you were. Malcolm has destroyed your reputation. If you surface, he'll find you. And if you speak of what you've seen here, of vampires and blood and ancient houses, you'll be declared mad. The truth of it settled over her like a shroud. Her old life was gone. her friends, her social circle, the carefully constructed future she'd imagined, all of it dust. So I stay here, she said quietly. A prisoner in a vampire's castle. A guest, Lucian corrected, something almost gentle in his voice. Under my protection. Learning our ways. Deciding what you want your new life to look like. And if I want to leave, then you leave. He pushed off from the mantelpiece, closing some of the distance between them. I'm not Malcolm Ashford, Alara. I won't cage you or control you. But I won't lie to you either. The world out there is dangerous for a woman alone with no resources and a ruined name. Here at least, you're safe. Safe. That word again. She was beginning to understand. It had layers she'd never considered before. Teach me, Alara heard herself say. If I'm going to survive in this world, I need to understand it. The houses, the laws, the dangers. Teach me how to navigate this. Lucian studied her for a long moment, something like respect dawning in his amber eyes. Very well, he said finally. Your lessons begin tomorrow night. Chapter 4. The Weight of Centuries. Library smelled of leather and time. Alara ran her fingers along the spines of books that lined the shelves from floor to ceiling, volumes in languages she recognized and many she didn't. Latin, French, something that looked like it might be Arabic. The collection spanned centuries, perhaps millennia. A testament to the immortal who'd assembled it, Lucian stood by a large table in the center of the room, unrolling a map that looked hand-drawn. Its edges yellowed with age. This is the region as it stands now, he said, gesturing for her to join him. 7 houses, 7 territories. Some borders are fixed by treaty. Others are contested. Alara moved closer, studying the map. She recognized some landmarks: the river that ran through the valley, the mountain range to the north, but the boundaries drawn across them were unfamiliar, dividing the land in ways that had nothing to do with mortal governance. House Blackthorn, Lucian pointed to the eastern hills, where they currently stood. Small territory but easily defended. We've held it for 300 years. His finger moved across the map. House Silvermere to the north, old money, old blood, they maintained the appearance of civility. House Corvus in the west, ruthless and efficient. House Nightshade south, known for their alchemists and poison makers. Each name sent a chill through her. These weren't distant myths. They were neighbors. And these? Alara indicated 3 territories marked in different colors. House Moreau, French migrants who fled the revolution and brought their brutality with them. House Valdis, who believed vampires should rule openly over humans. And House Crescent, the youngest house, barely a century old, still trying to prove themselves. 7 houses, Alara repeated. All competing for what? Territory? Power? Influence? Resources? Blood? Lucian's expression darkened. Some houses maintain farms, estates where humans live and work, providing blood in exchange for protection. Others hunt in cities, taking what they need from the desperate and forgotten. A few, like Blackthorn, employ willing donors and keep our numbers small to avoid drawing attention. Alara's mind reeled. How many vampires are we talking about? In this region? Perhaps 200. Worldwide? He shrugged. Impossible to know. We're solitary by nature, territorial. Most vampires you'll never see. They keep to themselves, feeding quietly, avoiding conflicts. It's the houses that create problems. Ambition breeds violence. She studied the map again, noting how Blackthorn territory was pressed between larger, more aggressive houses. You're surrounded. Yes. The single word held weight. Is that why you live like this? Hidden underground, with wards and protection? She looked at him directly. Are you in danger? Lucian was quiet for a moment, his amber eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice carried the weariness of centuries. I was part of House Silvermere once. Second son of the House Lord, destined for a comfortable existence of political maneuvering and blood sport. His jaw tightened. I disagreed with my father's methods, with the way he treated humans as disposable, with the cruelty he called tradition. Alara waited, sensing there was more. I challenged him. Not for leadership. I had no desire to rule. I simply wanted change, mercy, a different way. Lucian's hands clenched on the edge of the table. He called it weakness, rebellion. He stripped me of my position and cast me out. I took what few vampires agreed with me and established House Blackthorn. We've been enemies ever since. Your own father, Alara whispered, is now my greatest threat. Lucian met her gaze, and she saw old pain there, carefully contained. Lord Victor Silvermere doesn't forgive betrayal. even from his own blood. Especially from his own blood. He's been waiting for 3 centuries for me to make a mistake, to give him justification to destroy what I've built. Understanding dawned cold and sharp. Malcolm, if your father learns you've claimed protection over a human fleeing mortal justice, he'll call it interference in human affairs. A violation of the accords that keep the houses from open war. Lucian's voice was steady, but she heard the tension beneath. He'll use it as an excuse to move against me. Then why did you help me? Alara demanded, frustration and fear warring in her chest. Why risk everything for a stranger? Because it was right. The answer came without hesitation. Because I've spent 300 years building a house based on principles that matter: consent, protection, honor. What good are those principles if I abandon them the moment they become inconvenient? He moved around the table, closing the distance between them. This close, Alara could see the fine details that marked him as other, the way his skin seemed almost luminous in the candlelight, the absolute stillness when he wasn't deliberately moving, the predatory focus in his gaze. You were bleeding in my forest, Lucian said quietly, hunted by a man who would have killed you to preserve his pride. I could no more walk away from that than I could walk into sunlight and survive. Alara's throat tightened. I've put you in danger. You've given me purpose. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were cool against her skin. For 3 centuries, I've hidden in these halls, maintaining the old ways, but changing nothing. You remind me why those ways matter. The touch lingered a moment too long. Alara's breath caught, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. She wondered if he could hear it, if he could sense the way her heart raced when he stood this close. Lucian withdrew his hand abruptly, stepping back as if he'd crossed a line. You should rest, he said, his voice rougher than before. Tomorrow night, I'll teach you about blood bonds and feeding customs. You need to understand the rules if you're to navigate this world safely. Lucian, she caught his arm as he turned away. Through the fabric of his shirt, she felt marble-cold skin and the faint, impossible beat of a heart that shouldn't still be beating. Thank you, for the truth, for not treating me like a child who needs pretty lies. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition of something he hadn't expected to find. You're stronger than you know, Alara. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Braver than most immortals I've met. Don't let this world make you doubt that. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the shadows with that unnatural silence. Alara stood alone in the library, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of centuries, her hands still warm from touching him. Outside this sanctuary, vampire houses plotted and schemed. Malcolm searched for her with mortal rage. Danger pressed from all sides, but here, in the quiet darkness, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt like herself, clear-minded, purposeful, ready to fight for a life worth living, whatever came next. She wouldn't face it as a victim. She'd face it as someone who'd chosen to survive. Chapter 5. Threads of Blood and Trust. Alara found Lucian in the music room 3 nights later. She'd spent the intervening time exploring the sanctuary, learning its rhythms. Grace had shown her the garden's underground caverns where plants grew under carefully tended magical lights that mimic sunlight. Cook had fed her meals that tasted of comfort and normalcy. And each night, Lucian had taught her the intricate laws that governed vampire society, blood bonds, feeding etiquette, the complex web of debts and favors that connected the houses, treaties signed in blood that lasted centuries. She'd absorbed it all with the desperate focus of someone learning to navigate a foreign country where one wrong step could prove fatal. But tonight, she'd followed the sound of music. Lucian sat at the pianoforte, his fingers moving across the keys with supernatural precision. The melody was haunting something baroque, she thought, though she couldn't name the composer. He played with his eyes closed, lost in the music, and for the first time since she'd met him, his careful control had slipped. She saw grief in the set of his shoulders, loneliness in the way his head bowed toward the keys. He looked heartbreakingly human. Alara waited until the final notes faded before speaking. That was beautiful. Lucian's eyes opened, finding her in the doorway. He didn't startle, vampires didn't. She'd learned, but something shifted in his expression. The mask of the immortal lord slipping back into place. Bach, he said. I knew him briefly. Arrogant man. Brilliant but arrogant. A faint smile touched his lips. He'd have hated how I just played that. You knew Johann Sebastian Bach. Alara shook her head, still struggling to comprehend the scope of his existence. You've lived through centuries I can only read about in history books, and you find that fascinating or terrifying? Both. She moved into the room, drawn by curiosity and something else she didn't want to name. Do you remember it all? Every year? Every person you've met? Lucian considered this, his fingers resting silent on the keys. Not everything. Memory fades, even for us. Centuries blur together, but certain moments remain crystal clear, the important ones. The ones that changed me. Like leaving your father's house? Like that, yes. He patted the bench beside him. Would you like to learn? Elara hesitated, then sat. The space between them was small, intimate. She could feel the cold that radiated from him, a reminder of what he was. I don't know how to play, she admitted. I'll teach you. Lucian guided her hands to the keys, his fingers cool against hers. Press here, and here. That's a C chord. She followed his instruction, the notes ringing out clear and simple. He showed her another chord, then another, building a basic melody. His patience was infinite, his touch gentle. When she made mistakes, he didn't criticize, simply guided her back to the correct position. You're a good teacher, Elara said after a while. I've had practice. 3 centuries of it. He withdrew his hands, letting her try on her own. I've taught languages, history, music. Skills to fill the endless nights. Is it lonely? The question escaped before she could stop it. Immortality? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a rawness she hadn't heard before. Yes, unbearably so sometimes. He stared at the keys, not meeting her eyes. You watch everyone you care for age and die. You form connections knowing they're temporary. After a while, it becomes easier not to form them at all. Easier to stay alone. Elara's chest tightened. Grace said you've had the same staff for years. That doesn't sound like staying alone. Grace and the others are employees. I care for their welfare, ensure their safety, but I maintain distance. It's kinder that way. His jaw clenched. When you've buried as many people as I have, you learn that distance is a mercy. That sounds like a lonely way to exist, perhaps. He finally looked at her, amber eyes reflecting the candlelight. But it's survival. We adapt or we break, Elara. I chose adaptation. She understood it then, the careful walls he'd built, the controlled distance he maintained. Not cruelty, but self-preservation. A heart protecting itself from 3 centuries of grief. Is that why you won't feed from your staff directly? She asked, remembering what Grace had told her about the clinical donations. To maintain distance? Lucian's expression shuddered. Feeding is intimate. Even when it's consensual, even when it's just sustenance, there's a connection formed. A vulnerability. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, though there was no window, just stone walls hung with tapestries. I won't blur those lines with people who depend on me for their livelihood. But you're hungry. Elara stood too, certainty crystallizing. I've seen the way you look sometimes when you think I'm not watching. The control it takes. You're denying yourself to maintain that distance. I'm fine. You're suffering. She crossed to him, daring to place a hand on his arm. Lucian, if you need know, the word came out sharp, almost pained. He pulled away from her touch as if it burned. You don't understand what you're offering. Then explain it to me. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time, she saw the predator beneath the gentleman. His eyes had darkened, pupils expanding. When he spoke, she heard the edge of fangs in his words. When a vampire feeds directly from someone, there's a connection formed. We taste not just blood, but emotion, memory, essence. It's intoxicating, addictive. And with someone I actually care about, he stopped himself, breathing hard though he didn't need air. I won't risk that with you. Someone you care about, Elara repeated softly. Do you care about me? The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Lucian's control was fracturing. She could see it in the tension of his body, the way his hands clenched at his sides. You should go, now. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. His voice dropped to a growl. I'm holding on to control by a thread, Elara. Don't push me. But she didn't move, couldn't move, because she saw past the threat to the truth beneath. He was afraid, not of hurting her, but of wanting her, of breaking the rules he'd built to keep himself isolated and safe. What if I want to be pushed? She whispered. The words seemed to shatter something in him. Lucian closed the distance between them in a blur of movement, his hand cupping her face with desperate gentleness. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his eyes searching hers for something she didn't fully understand. You don't know what you're asking, he breathed, then show me. For one suspended moment, she thought he might kiss her, thought he might close the final distance and let the careful walls crumble. She could feel the tension radiating from him, desire and denial warring in his expression. Then Grace's voice shattered the moment. Lord Blackthorn. The urgency in her tone sent ice through Alara's veins. You need to come quickly. There are vampires at the border. House Silvermere. They're demanding entry. Lucian released Alara instantly, his expression shifting to cold calculation. How many? 5 that we can see. But my lord, Grace's voice trembled. They're carrying your father's banner. Chapter 6. The wolves at the Gadalucian sanctuary had a war room. Alara followed him through passages she hadn't seen before, deeper into the hillside, until they reached a chamber carved from living rock. Maps covered one wall. Weapons, swords, daggers, things she couldn't name lined another. In the center stood a table with a surface that shimmered like black glass. Grace was already there, along with 2 men Alara hadn't met. One was elderly, human, with sharp eyes and military bearing. The other was younger, perhaps 30, with Grace's auburn coloring, and the same warm brown eyes. Thomas. Report. Lucian's voice had transformed. All traces of the vulnerable man from the music room gone. This was the Lord of House Blackthorn, ancient and commanding. The older man stepped forward. 5 vampires at the eastern border, my lord. They arrived an hour ago. Standard diplomatic formation to guards, a courier, and to witnesses. They're flying Lord Victor's personal standard and requesting parley under the accords, requesting or demanding. The distinction was unclear. Thomas's mouth tightened. They were polite, but the courier made it clear they won't leave until you meet with them. Lucian stared at the black glass table, which Alara now realized was some kind of scrying surface. Shadows moved across it, figures standing at what must be the edge of his territory. What do they want? Alara asked quietly. Me. Lucian didn't look away from the table. Or, more specifically, information about why I've claimed protection over a human wanted for theft by mortal authorities. Her stomach dropped. How do they know? Malcolm Ashford has been making noise, offering rewards, spreading your description, claiming you stole a fortune in jewels. The younger man spoke for the first time, his voice bitter. Some fool must have seen the marks I left, and reported them. Silvermere has spies everywhere. This is my brother, James, Grace said softly to Alara. He maintains the border wards. Lucian's hands flattened on the table. If I refuse to meet with them, it's an insult. Victor can claim I'm hiding something, violating the accords by interfering in human justice. If I meet with them and they don't like my answers, war. Thomas finished grimly. He's been looking for an excuse for 3 centuries, my lord. This might be it. The weight of it crushed down on Alara. All of this, the danger, the threat of violence because she'd fled a man who'd tried to kill her. Because Lucian had chosen mercy over politics. I'll go with you, she said. I'll tell them the truth. That Malcolm is a liar, that I'm not a thief. No, Lucian's voice was absolute. They won't care about truth. They care about leverage, about finding weakness they can exploit. I won't give them access to you. Then what will you do? He was quiet for a long moment, studying the shadows on the scrying surface. When he spoke, his voice was steady, decided. I'll meet with them. Here. In the formal receiving hall. Neutral ground. With witnesses. He looked at Thomas. Standard diplomatic protocols. Grace. James, I want both of you present. And bring William and Margaret as well. I want my full household visible. Show them we're not hiding. Not afraid. And her? Thomas gestured to Alara. She stays out of sight. Lucian finally turned to face her. My private chambers. Warded and locked. If this goes badly, if they try to force entry, James will get you out through the escape tunnels. You're protecting me again, Alara said, frustration and fear tangling in her chest. Putting yourself at risk for what's right. He crossed to her, his expression softening fractionally. This isn't your fault, Alara. Victor has been circling for centuries. You're just the excuse he's using. If it wasn't this, it would be something else. That doesn't make it better. No, he reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. His fingers were ice cold, but his grip was steady. But it's the truth. And I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Alara looked into his amber eyes and saw the weight of 300 years of calculated survival. But she also saw the man who'd played Bach with his eyes closed, who'd taught her piano with infinite patience, who'd admitted that immortality was lonely. I trust you, she whispered, something in his expression cracked open. Just for a moment, gratitude, relief, something deeper she didn't dare name. Grace will take you to my chambers, Lucian said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles before he released her hand. Stay there until I come for you. No matter what you hear, no matter how long it takes, promise me. I promise. An hour later, Alara sat in Lucian's private chambers, listening to the muffled sounds of voices echoing through stone corridors. The room was more personal than anywhere else she'd been in the sanctuary. Books stacked on a reading table, a desk covered in correspondence, a wardrobe full of clothes spanning multiple centuries of fashion. On one wall hung a portrait of a younger Lucian, dressed in Renaissance finery, standing beside an older vampire who could only be his father. They shared the same sharp features, the same commanding presence. But where Lucian's eyes held warmth, Victor's were cold as wind or ice. The voices grew louder. Alara moved to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. Violation of the accords. A voice she didn't recognize, cultured and dangerous. You've interfered in mortal justice. Claim protection over a human criminal. Lord Victor demands an explanation. I claim protection over an innocent woman fleeing an abusive situation. Lucian's voice carried clearly, calm and unwavering. There's no violation. The accords allow for sanctuary in cases of persecution. Persecution? A different voice, female and sharp. She's wanted for theft. The mortal authorities have documented evidence. The mortal authorities have the word of a man who tried to kill her when she refused his advances. Lucian's tone hardened. I've seen the wound myself. Malcolm Ashford is a liar and a predator. I won't hand her over to be murdered for his pride. Silence stretched. Then the first voice again, icy and precise. You seem quite invested in this human's welfare, Lord Blackthorn. One might wonder why. One might wonder why Lord Victor sends 5 vampires to question a simple act of mercy, because mercy is often a mask for weakness. And Lord Victor doesn't tolerate weakness in his bloodline. Alara's breath caught. The threat was barely veiled. Then it's fortunate I'm no longer part of his bloodline. Lucian's voice dropped to something dangerous. I left House Silvermere 3 centuries ago. What I do in my own territory is no concern of his. Everything you do concerns him, boy. The female voice turned venomous. You carry his blood. You bear his shame. And when he decides you've become too much of an embarrassment, a crash. The sound of furniture splintering. Alara's hand flew to the door handle. Lucian's warning forgotten. But before she could turn it, James appeared beside her, moving with vampire speed she hadn't known he possessed. Don't. His eyes glowed amber in the darkness. You'll only make it worse. They're threatening him, he can handle it. But James's expression was grim. Lord Victor is testing him, pushing to see if he'll break, if he'll give them an excuse to declare breach of treaty. Lucian knows this game. He's played it for 3 centuries. More sounds of violence. Lucian's voice, cold and absolute. Get out of my sanctuary, now, before I forget the rules of hospitality and remind you why House Blackthorn, small as it is, has survived this long. Footsteps. The slam of heavy doors, then silence. Alara sagged against the wall, her heart pounding. James touched her shoulder gently. He won, the young vampire said quietly. They came for blood or submission. They got neither. But when Lucian finally returned, blood staining his white shirt and his knuckles split, Alara saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. Chapter 7. Blood and Boundary. Alara's hands shook as she cleaned the blood from Lucian's knuckles. He sat silent in a chair by the fire, his shirt ruined, his expression distant. Grace had brought water and bandages before retreating, leaving them alone in his chambers. The blood wasn't his. Alara had learned enough to know that vampire wounds healed almost instantly. This belonged to whoever he'd fought. You're angry, Lucian said quietly. I'm terrified. She pressed the cloth against his split skin, watching it knit together beneath her touch. They came here to provoke you, to find an excuse for war. And I'm the reason. You're the excuse, not the reason. His hand caught hers, stilling her movements. Victor has wanted to destroy me since the day I left. This was inevitable. Then why protect me? The question came out raw, desperate. Why not hand me over and buy yourself peace? Lucian's amber eyes met hers, and she saw something fierce burning there. Because peace bought with betrayal isn't peace. It's surrender. His grip on her hand tightened. And I didn't survive 3 centuries by surrendering my principles when they became inconvenient. Alara set aside the cloth, her fingers still caught in his. What happened down there? I heard furniture breaking, voices. Victor's courier tried to push past diplomatic bounds. Implied that my protection of you was personal. Suggested I'd grown weak, that I was thinking with parts of my anatomy that have no place in house politics. A muscle ticked in his jaw. I reminded him that I'm still a vampire lord, small house or not, and that there are consequences for insults delivered in my own hall. You fought him, briefly, enough to draw blood and make a point. Lucian's expression darkened. He was testing me, seeing if I'd lose control. If I'd kill a diplomatic envoy and give Victor justification for retaliation. I didn't give him the satisfaction. She studied his face, the careful control barely masking fury, the weight of centuries of calculated restraint. How do you do it? How do you stay so calm when everything in you wants to fight? Practice. And the knowledge that losing control means losing everything I've built. He released her hand, standing to pace the room. Victor wants me angry, wants me reckless. Because a reckless vampire makes mistakes, and mistakes can be exploited. Alara watched him move, predatory grace contained in human form. What happens now? Now they report back to Victor. He'll claim I was hostile, that I'm harboring criminals. That House Blackthorn represents a threat to regional stability. Lucian stopped by the window. That wasn't a window. Staring at the tapestry that covered stone. He'll call for a conclave, a gathering of the houses to discuss the matter formally. And if the other houses side with him, then I'll be forced to surrender you or face sanctions, possibly exile. At worst. He didn't finish the sentence. War. He meant war. Alara's chest tightened. Let me go. I'll leave tonight. Disappear into the mortal world. Malcolm will never find me if I'm careful, and your father won't have anything to use against you. No, the word was absolute. Lucian turned to face her, crossing the space between them into strides. You'd be dead within a week. Malcolm has resources, connections. And now that Victor knows about you, he'll make sure word reaches every vampire in the region. You'd be hunted by immortals and mortals alike. Then what am I supposed to do? Hide here forever while you fight battles on my behalf? You're supposed to trust that I know how to navigate this. His hands gripped her shoulders, gentle despite the intensity in his voice. I've played these games for 3 centuries, Alara. I know Victor's strategies, his weaknesses. This isn't over just because he sent threatening envoys. You're not invincible, Lucian. Her voice cracked. You're one vampire with a small house against a father who commands dozens. How can you possibly? Because I have something he doesn't. Lucian's thumbs traced small circles on her shoulders, the touch unconscious and soothing. I have loyalty earned through respect, not fear. My household would die for me because they choose to, not because they're compelled. That's worth more than Victor's entire army. Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the certainty she heard in his voice. But fear clawed at her chest, whispering that she was going to cost him everything. I can't bear the thought of you hurt because of me, she whispered. Something shifted in Lucian's expression. His hands slid from her shoulders to frame her face, tilting it up toward his. Then you understand how I feel every time you talk about leaving. The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Alara's breath caught. This close, she could see flecks of gold in his amber eyes, could feel the supernatural coldness of his skin against hers. Everything about him screamed predator, danger, other, but all she felt was safe. Lucian, I need to feed. The words came out rough, almost pained. The fight. The blood, it's awakened the hunger. I need to go down to the donations before he released her abruptly, stepping back. You should rest. Tomorrow night will bring challenges enough, but Alara caught his wrist before he could retreat. Wait. He froze, every muscle in his body going taut. Alara, don't. You said feeding from donations is clinical, necessary, but empty. She stepped closer, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. You said direct feeding creates a connection. An intimacy. Yes. The word came out strangled. Which is why you need to let me go. Now. What if I want that connection? Her free hand rose to his chest, feeling the slow, deliberate beat of his heart beneath her palm. What if I want you to feed from me? Lucian's control shattered visibly. His hand covered hers, pressing it harder against his chest. His eyes had darkened, pupils blown wide with hunger and desire tangled together. You don't know what you're offering, he growled. Once that line is crossed, once I taste you, Know you that way there's no going back. You'll be bound to me in ways that go beyond simple protection. Maybe I want to be bound to you. The confession escaped before she could stop it. Maybe I'm tired of being protected from a distance. Maybe I want. He kissed her. One moment they were standing apart, tension crackling between them. The next, his mouth was on hers, fierce and desperate and careful all at once. One hand tangled in her hair, the other braced against her lower back, pulling her close against the cold marble of his body. Alara gasped, and he deepened the kiss, centuries of restraint crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. She could feel the sharpness of his fangs against her lower lip, could taste the danger and desire, could feel herself falling into something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. When he finally pulled back, they were both shaking. Tomorrow, Lucian breathed against her lips. If you still want this tomorrow, if you still trust me after tonight, then he stopped himself, resting his forehead against hers. But not now. Not when I'm this close to losing control. You deserve better than a vampire who can't promise gentleness. Alara's fingers curled into his ruined shirt. I'm not afraid of you. I know. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, achingly tender. That's what terrifies me. Chapter 8. The breaking point. Alara woke to the sound of bells. Not church bells, something older, deeper, resonating through the stone itself. She sat up in the guest chamber, where she'd finally retreated hours ago, her lips still tingling from Lucian's kiss, her mind spinning with everything that had passed between them. The bells rang again. 3 times. A warning. She threw on the burgundy dress and ran into the corridor. Grace appeared from a side passage, her face pale. What's happening? The border wards. Grace's voice trembled. Someone's trying to breach them. Multiple someones. They found Lucian in the war room, surrounded by his household. Thomas stood at the scrying table, his hands moving across the black glass surface. James was armoring himself with weapons that looked medieval and deadly. Even Cook was there, a woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair and a crossbow that looked well used. How many? Lucian demanded. 15. Maybe 20. Thomas's jaw clenched. House Silvermere colors. They're not bothering with subtlety, they want us to know they're here. Victor wouldn't dare attack directly, but Lucian's voice held uncertainty. The Accords forbid unprovoked assault. The other houses would unite against him. Unless he's not attacking. James fastened the last of his weapons. Unless he's creating a situation where you have to attack first. Understanding dawned on Alara like ice water. They're going to breach the wards, force their way in. And when you defend your territory, it becomes aggression instead of defense. Lucian's hands flattened on the table. Clever. Victor always was clever. The bells rang again, more urgently. The wards are failing, Thomas reported. They're using blood magic. Old magic. They'll be through within the hour. Lucian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, decided. Evacuate the household. Thomas, you know the protocols. Get everyone to the safe house in the valley. Take Alara. No, Alara stepped forward. I'm not running while you face them alone. You're exactly what they want. Lucian turned to face her, his expression fierce. Once they're inside, they'll search for you. Use you as proof that I've violated the Accords. I won't let that happen. So you'll fight them? 20 vampires against you and James? She shook her head. That's suicide. That's necessity. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his cold grip. Alara, please. I need to know you're safe. I can't fight them and protect you at the same time. Then let me help. You're human. They'd kill you in seconds. I'm human, she agreed. Which means I'm unexpected. Vampires expect to fight other vampires. They won't see me coming. Lucian's eyes flashed. Absolutely not. Crash shook the sanctuary. Dust rained from the ceiling. The wards had fallen. They're inside, James said grimly. East entrance. Moving fast, Thomas ushered Grace and the others toward the escape tunnels. Cook paused long enough to press her crossbow into Alara's hands. Silver-tipped bolts, the older woman said. Won't kill them, but it'll slow them down. Aim for the heart. Then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows with the rest of the household. Lucian, James, and Alara stood alone in the war room. I can't protect you and fight them, Lucian said again, desperation bleeding into his voice. Then don't protect me. Alara checked the crossbow, remembering the hunting lessons her father had given her years ago. Let me protect myself. And you? Footsteps echoed through the corridors. Multiple sets, moving with preternatural speed. James positioned himself at the door, twin blades appearing in his hands. Lucian looked at Alara, conflict warring across his features. Then, with visible effort, he made his choice. Stay behind me. Don't engage unless you have to. And if I tell you to run, I won't run. She met his gaze steadily. Not from this. Not from you. The first vampire came through the door in a blur of motion. James met him with steel, the clash of blades ringing through the chamber. Two more followed, spreading out to flank them. Lucian moved like liquid death. One moment he was beside Alara, the next he had a vampire pinned against the wall, his hand wrapped around the creature's throat. You're trespassing. Leave now, and I'll let you live. The vampire laughed, the sound wet and cruel. Lord Victor sends his regards. He says it's time to come home, little prince. With or without your dignity intact. Lucian's grip tightened. The vampire's laughter choked off. Tell Victor, Lucian said softly, that I'd rather face the sun than return to his house. He snapped the vampire's neck with a sharp twist. The body crumpled. Four more burst into the room. The fight became chaos. James was a whirlwind of blades, holding to vampires at bay. Lucian faced three others, moving too fast for Alara's eyes to track. She pressed herself against the wall, crossbow raised, looking for an opening. One of the vampires broke away from Lucian, moving toward the escape tunnel, toward where the household had fled. Alara didn't think. She aimed and fired. The bolt caught the vampire in the shoulder. Silver burned against undead flesh, and the creature screamed, stumbling. It gave Lucian the opening he needed. He was there in an instant, ending the threat with brutal efficiency, but the distraction cost him. One of the other vampires slammed into him from behind, driving him to the ground. Claws raked across his back, shredding his shirt and the flesh beneath. Lucian. Alara's scream tore from her throat. The vampire on top of him looked up, eyes gleaming red with bloodlust. Female, beautiful in a terrible way, with blonde hair and a smile full of fangs. So this is the little human causing all the trouble, she purred. Victor was right. You've grown soft, Blackthorn. Lucian threw her off with a surge of strength that cracked the stone floor. He rolled to his feet, blood streaming down his back. The wounds should have been healing. They weren't. Poison, James hissed, recognizing it. House Nightshade venom. The wounds won't close. The blonde vampire circled, still smiling. Victor made alliances while you hid in your sanctuary. House Nightshade wants your territory. We want your blood. Everyone wins, except us, Alara thought. She reloaded the crossbow with shaking hands. More vampires poured into the room. 8, 10, too many. Lucian and James fought like demons, but they were outnumbered, and Lucian was weakening. The venom was spreading, slowing his movements. One of the vampires got past his guard, claws ripping across his chest. He staggered. Alara raised the crossbow and fired again. And again. Silver bolts finding targets, buying precious seconds. But it wasn't enough. The blonde vampire appeared beside her in a blur. The crossbow was torn from her hands and crushed. Cold fingers wrapped around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Victor said to bring you alive, the vampire whispered. He didn't say undamaged. Lucian's roar shook the chamber. Let her go. The vampire's grip tightened. Black spots danced across Alara's vision. Then, impossibly, she heard another voice, deep, commanding, ancient. Enough. Everyone froze. A new vampire stood in the doorway, older than any Alara had seen. Power radiating from him like heat from a forge. He wore crimson and black, Victor's colors, but something in his bearing suggested authority beyond a simple soldier. Lord Victor has called for conclave, he announced. All parties are to stand down immediately and attend the gathering tomorrow night. These are the terms of the accords. Refusal means war with all 7 houses. The blonde vampire's grip loosened fractionally. We were ordered, your orders are superseded. The ancient vampire's eyes swept the room, lingering on Lucian. The conclave will decide House Blackthorn's fate. Until then, this sanctuary is neutral ground. Slowly, reluctantly, the attacking vampires withdrew. The blonde released Alara, who collapsed to the floor, gasping, within minutes. The war room was empty except for Lucian, James, and Alara. Lucian dropped to his knees beside her, his face ashen, his wounds still bleeding. Are you hurt? I'm fine. She touched his face with shaking hands. You're not. The poison will pass, eventually. He pulled her against him, heedless of the blood. You could have been killed. You should have run. So should you. She whispered into his shoulder, James cleared his throat. The conclave. Tomorrow night. All 7 houses will be there. His expression was grim. They'll put you on trial, my lord. Demand answers. Demand her. Lucian's arms tightened around Alara. Against her ear, he whispered words meant only for her. Then we'll give them answers. Just not the ones they expect. Chapter 9. The conclave met in neutral territory, an abandoned cathedral that had belonged to no house for centuries. Alara stood beside Lucian in the shadows of the nave, watching as vampires from all 7 houses filed into the ancient space. Candlelight flickered across stone pillars and shattered stained glass. The air smelled of dust and old incense and something else, power, ancient and threatening. Grace had dressed her in midnight blue silk, a gown that belonged to another era. You need to look like you belong to his world, the young woman had whispered, while fastening the buttons. Not like prey. Now, surrounded by immortals whose eyes tracked her every movement, Alara understood the wisdom. She wasn't here to cower. She was here to fight. Lucian had healed enough to stand, though she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he held himself. The poison had taken its toll. He wore formal attire, black coat, silver brocade waistcoat, everything meticulously tailored to Project Power. Despite his small house, there, he murmured, nodding toward a group entering through the main doors. House Silvermere. Victor Blackthorn was everything his son was not. Where Lucian moved with controlled grace, Victor commanded the space around him like a king. Tall, broad-shouldered, with steel gray hair, and eyes like winter storms. Power radiated from him in waves. 5 vampires flanked him, including the blonde who'd nearly killed Alara. His gaze found Lucian across the cathedral. Father and son locked eyes, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The others are arriving, James whispered from Lucian's other side. He'd insisted on attending as witness. Despite the danger, House Silvermere took their position on the north side of the nave. One by one, the other houses claimed their territories. House Corvus, a woman with raven dark hair and eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian, accompanied by vampires who moved like assassins. House Nightshade, the poison makers, led by a thin man whose smile never reached his cold eyes. House Moreau, French migress dripping with old-world cruelty and jewels that caught the candlelight. House Valdez, believers in vampire supremacy. Their leader, a scarred warrior who looked at Alara like she was an insect. House Crescent, the youngest house, eager and dangerous in their need to prove themselves. And finally, House Silvermere's ancient allies arrived. House Ashenwood, small but influential, who'd apparently maintained neutrality for centuries. 7 houses, perhaps 60 vampires in total, all gathered to judge whether Lucian had violated the accords. An elderly vampire stepped forward, the same one who'd stopped the attack in Lucian's sanctuary. He wore robes that marked him as Conclave Keeper, the neutral arbiter of vampire law. The Conclave is called to order. His voice echoed through the cathedral. Lord Victor Silvermere has brought charges against Lord Lucian Blackthorn of violating the accords by harboring a human criminal wanted by mortal authorities. Lord Blackthorn, how do you answer these charges? Lucian stepped forward, his hand briefly squeezing Alara's before releasing it. I answer that the charges are false. I claim protection over an innocent woman fleeing persecution. The accords explicitly allow for sanctuary in such cases. Innocent? Victor's voice cut through the space like a blade. The mortal authorities say otherwise. Malcolm Ashford has sworn testimony that this woman, he gestured dismissively toward Alara, stole valuable property and fled when confronted. Malcolm Ashford is a liar who attempted murder when his proposal was rejected. Lucian's voice remained steady. I have evidence of the knife wound he inflicted. Her blood was on his blade. Convenient that you destroyed that evidence by healing her. The blonde vampire from Victor's entourage smiled coldly. We have only your word. My word, Lucian said quietly, has been good for 300 years. Can Victor say the same? Murmurs rippled through the gathered houses. Victor's expression darkened. I dare speak truth in a conclave. Lucian's voice grew stronger. The accords protect our right to offer sanctuary to humans fleeing persecution. I exercise that right. Everything else is Victor's vendetta against a son who refused to become a monster like his father. The cathedral fell silent. Victor's smile was terrible. Careful, boy. That sounds like an accusation. It is an accusation. Lucian spread his hands. Everyone here knows why you're really doing this. It has nothing to do with the accords or mortal justice. You want to destroy House Blackthorn because I dared to leave you. Dared to build something better than your empire of fear. Enough, the conclave keeper's voice cracked like thunder. This is about law, not family grievances. Lord Blackthorn, you claim the woman is innocent. Can you prove it? This was the moment. Lucian had prepared her for this. I can, Alara said, stepping forward before Lucian could stop her. Every eye in the cathedral turned to her. The weight of 60 immortal gazes pressed down like physical force. Her heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. My name is Alara Ashford. Malcolm is my cousin by marriage. He proposed 3 months ago. I refused. She pulled down the shoulder of her gown, revealing the scar Lucian's blood had left pale and raised against her skin. This is where he stabbed me when I tried to leave his estate. He would have killed me if Lord Blackthorn hadn't intervened. A scar proves nothing, Victor said dismissively. You could have gotten that anywhere. But I didn't. Alara met his gaze directly, refusing to flinch. I got it from a man who believed I was his property, who hunted me with dogs like an animal, who would have buried me in those woods and told everyone I was a thief. Human matters, the leader of House Valdis growled. Why should we care about mortal violence? Because the Accords were written to prevent exactly this. The voice came from an unexpected source, Lady Corvus, the raven-haired assassin. She stepped forward, her dark eyes thoughtful. We claim to be civilized, to live by rules that separate us from monsters. But if we ignore persecution, if we punish those who offer sanctuary, then we're no better than the humans who burned our kind in centuries past. Several vampires shifted uncomfortably. The conclave keeper studied Lady Corvus with interest. You support Blackthorn's claim? I support the law. Lady Corvus's smile was sharp. And the law says sanctuary is permitted for those fleeing genuine persecution. From what I hear, Lord Blackthorn acted within his rights. House Ashenwood concurs, another voice added. The neutral house's representative, a scholarly-looking vampire, nodded slowly. The Accords are clear. If Blackthorn's account is accurate, he violated nothing. Victor's fury was palpable. She admits to refusing a legitimate marriage proposal, to causing scandal, neither of which are crimes, Lucian interrupted. Saying no isn't theft. Protecting yourself isn't criminal. And offering sanctuary to someone in genuine danger is exactly what our laws were designed for. The conclave keeper raised his hand for silence. The question before us is simple. Did Lord Blackthorn act within the bounds of the Accords? Lady Corvus and Lord Ashenwood say yes. Does anyone have evidence to the contrary? Silence. Victor's jaw clenched. This isn't over. In fact, it is. The conclave keeper's voice was final. I find no violation of the Accords. The charges are dismissed. House Blackthorn's claim of sanctuary stands. Relief flooded through Alara. Lucian's hand found hers, squeezing gently. But Victor wasn't finished. He stepped forward, his voice carrying through the cathedral. Very well. If the conclave won't address Blackthorn's violation of law, perhaps it will address a different matter. His smile was venomous. I invoke the right of challenge. My son has grown soft, weak, unsuited to lead even his small house. I challenge him for leadership of House Blackthorn and all assets and dependents within it. The cathedral erupted into chaos. Lucian's hand tightened on Alara's until it hurt. She looked up at him and saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Father, no, the right of challenge has been invoked, the conclave keeper said heavily. Do you accept, Lord Blackthorn? Or do you forfeit your house? Alara's blood ran cold. She understood now. Victor had never cared about the Accords. This had always been his goal, to force Lucian into a fight he couldn't win. A fight where the prize was everything Lucian had built, including her. Chapter 10. Blood oaths and choicest cathedral had emptied, leaving only the witnesses required by law, the conclave keeper, one representative from each house, and James standing rigid beside Lucian. Alara wanted to scream, wanted to tear Victor apart with her bare hands for the cruelty of this trap. But Lucian's grip on her hand kept her anchored, kept her silent. The terms, the conclave keeper intoned. State them clearly. Victor circled his son like a predator. Single combat. No interference. Winner takes leadership of House Blackthorn territory, assets, and all persons under protection. His eyes slid to Alara. All persons. You can't. Alara's voice broke the silence. She's not property to be won. No. Victor agreed, his smile terrible. She's a dependent under house protection, which means she transfers with the house. That's the law, girl. Ancient and binding. Lucian's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. I accept your terms with one addition. When I win, you withdraw all claims against House Blackthorn. Permanent peace between our houses. When you win? Victor laughed. You're poisoned, injured, and soft from 3 centuries of playing at morality. But very well. When I win, I absorb your territory and take the girl as my personal servant. When you lose because you will lose your precious principles die with your house. The conclave keeper raised his hand. Both parties have agreed. The challenge will commence at midnight. Prepare yourselves. The other houses filed out, leaving Lucian, Alara, and James alone in the shadows of the cathedral. You can't fight him, Alara said, the moment they were alone. You're still healing. The poison I don't have a choice. Lucian turned to face her, cupping her face in his cold hands. If I refuse, I forfeit everything. The house, the territory you. At least this way, I have a chance. What chance? She gripped his wrists desperately. He's strong or older, and you can barely stand without wincing. This is suicide. This is the only option. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. I won't let him have you, Alara. I won't let him turn you into what he tried to make me, a monster who sees humans as things to be used and discarded. James cleared his throat. There might be another way. Both of them turned to him. A blood bond, James said carefully, between Lord Blackthorn and Alara. If she's bound to him by choice, by old magic, then Victor can't claim her. She'd be more than a dependent. She'd be his companion. Legally protected even if the house falls. Alara's heart stuttered. What does that mean? A blood bond? Lucian closed his eyes. It means I drink from you directly, and you drink from me. Our blood mingles, creates a connection that goes beyond simple feeding. It's intimate, binding, and nearly impossible to break. It wouldn't turn me? Not unless you died with my blood in your system. He opened his eyes, and she saw anguish there. But it would tie you to me, Alara. You'd feel what I feel. Know when I'm in danger, in pain. The bond works both ways. And if I die tonight, you'd feel that too. But she'd be free, James pressed. Victor couldn't touch her. The bond would mark her as belonging to no house, protected by the memory of one that fell. The other houses would honor that. Lucian shook his head. I won't trap her with magic. I won't make her feel my death. If you're so certain you'll die, then give me the choice. Alara's voice came out fierce. You've protected me, taught me, shown me a world I never knew existed. Let me protect you. Back. Let me choose this. You don't understand what you're asking, then explain it to me. She grabbed his lapels, forcing him to look at her. Stop protecting me from decisions and let me make them myself. Lucian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. The bond is forever, Alara. Even if I die, even if you live a full mortal life, you'll carry a piece of me until your last breath. You'll never be fully free of it. Of me. His hands covered hers. I've spent 300 years trying not to bind anyone to my existence. Trying not to condemn them to mourning me. I won't do that to you. What if I want to be bound to you? The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere honest. What if I choose you, Lucian? Not because you're protecting me, not because I'm grateful, but because in 3 weeks, you've shown me more honor, more genuine care, than anyone in my entire mortal life. His control cracked. She saw it in his eyes, desire and denial warring. I'm going to fight my father in less than an hour, he whispered. And I'm likely going to lose. I won't saddle you with that grief. You don't get to make that choice for me. Alara rose on her toes, her lips a breath from his. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from hard truths. I'm a woman who's choosing you, who wants the bond, wants the connection, even knowing the cost. Alara, she kissed him, not gentle, not careful, fierce and claiming, pouring everything she felt into the contact. His arms came around her, crushing her against him. 3 centuries of loneliness and restraint shattering in an instant. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, despite his lack of need for air. Lucian rested his forehead against hers. If we do this, he said quietly, there's no going back. Your blood will sing to mine. I'll know when you're afraid, when you're happy, when you're in danger. And you'll feel the same from me, including tonight, including if I know. She met his gaze steadily. I choose it anyway. I choose you. He looked at James, who nodded once, then back to Alara. Then we do this properly, with witnesses and intention, so the bond is recognized. Lucian's hand trembled slightly as he drew a small knife from his coat. James, Bear witness that this is freely given on both sides. Witnessed and acknowledged, James said formally. Lucian made a small cut across his palm, blood welling dark and rich. He offered it to Alara. Drink, he murmured, and speak your intention clearly. Alara pressed her lips to the wound, tasting copper and something else power, ancient and wild. I choose this bond freely. I bind myself to Lucian Blackthorn by blood and will. The words resonated through the cathedral, carrying weight beyond sound. Then Lucian gently took her hand, making a matching cut across her palm. His eyes met hers, asking permission one final time. Her nod. He brought her hand to his mouth. The moment his lips touched her blood, the world exploded into sensation. She felt him, truly felt him, as if a door had been thrown open between their souls. His fear for her safety, his desperate hope that he could protect her, his absolute certainty that she was worth dying for. And beneath it all, something else. Something that felt like love, ancient and patient and utterly devoted. Lucian gasped against her palm, his eyes widening. She knew he felt it too, her fierce determination, her trust in him. Her choice made with eyes wide open. The bond snapped into place like a lock finding its key. It's done, the conclave keeper's voice said from the doorway. Neither of them had heard him return. The blood bond is witnessed and recognized. Whatever happens tonight, the girl is protected. Lucian pulled Alara close, his face buried in her hair. She could feel his heart beating against her chest, slow, deliberate, but undeniably real. I'm going to win, he whispered fiercely. I'm going to beat him and come back to you. This bond isn't going to end tonight. Promise me. Alara breathed. I promise. The bells told midnight. It was time. Chapter 11. The duel of House Ashvite would take place in the cathedral's crypt. Alara descended the stone stairs behind Lucian, the blood bond humming between them like a taut wire. She could feel his determination, his fear, carefully locked away, the poison still burning through his veins. Every sensation was doubled her own terror and his controlled calm, creating a discordant symphony. The crypt was vast, pillars carved with names of the dead supporting a vaulted ceiling. The 7 houses arranged themselves along the walls. Vampires who'd lived for centuries, gathering to watch father fight son. Victor stood at the center, stripped to the waist. His body, a map of scars that should have healed but hadn't. Battle wounds, she realized. Reminders he'd chosen to keep. Lucian removed his coat, handing it to James. When he pulled off his shirt, Alara saw the marks of last night's fight, the poison wounds that still wept blood. Refusing to close completely. Last chance to yield, Victor called across the space. Bend the knee, acknowledge me as your better, and I'll let you keep your life. The girl in the house will be mine, but you'll survive. I'd rather die free than live under your rule, Lucian replied evenly. Victor's smile was cruel. So be it. The conclave keeper raised his hand. The challenge is issued and accepted. Combat continues until one party yields or dies. No interference permitted under penalty of exile. Begin. Victor moved first. He crossed the distance in a blur, faster than Alara's eyes could track. Lucian barely dodged, the blow that would have crushed his skull, grazing his shoulder instead. The impact sent him sprawling. Through the bond, Alara felt the spike of pain, the way the poison wounds tore wider with the movement. Lucian rolled to his feet, blood streaming down his back. Victor followed with relentless precision, each strike calculated to exploit injury, to drive his son toward failure. You were always weak, Victor said conversationally, landing a blow to Lucian's ribs that Alara heard crack. Even as a mortal child, you were soft, compassionate. I thought immortality would burn that weakness away. I was wrong. Lucian blocked the next strike, countering with a move that forced Victor back 3 steps. Compassion isn't weakness. It's what separates us from animals. We are animals. Victor's fist connected with Lucian's face, snapping his head back. Predators. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can become what you were meant to be. I'll never become you. They clashed again, a savage dance of supernatural speed and strength. Lucian was skilled. 3 centuries of existence had taught him how to fight. But Victor was stronger, fresher, and every blow pushed Lucian closer to collapse. Alara's hands clenched until her nails drew blood. Through the bond, she felt Lucian's exhaustion mounting, the poison spreading. He was losing. Lady Corvus leaned toward her companion. The boy fights well for someone half dead already. He fights for something beyond himself, Lord Ashenwood observed. That makes men dangerous. Victor heard them. His next strike came with enough force to shatter stone. Lucian twisted away, but not fast enough. Claws raked across his chest, opening wounds that matched the ones on his back. He went down hard. Yield, Victor commanded, standing over his son. Acknowledge defeat. Lucian pushed himself up on shaking arms. Blood pooled beneath him. No, stubborn fool. Victor kicked him in the ribs, the sound of breaking bone echoing through the crypt. You're going to die for a human girl and a handful of principles no one cares about. Through the bond, Elara felt Lucian's pain, the poison burning, the broken bones grinding, the exhaustion pulling him toward darkness. But underneath it all, she felt something else, love, fierce and absolute. He looked across the crypt, his amber eyes finding hers. Even battered and bleeding, his gaze held steady. I'm sorry, she felt through the bond. I tried. No, Elara thought back, not knowing if he could hear. Don't give up, please. But Victor's hand closed around Lucian's throat, lifting him off the ground. Any last words, boy? Lucian's voice came out hoarse but clear. Yes, you taught me everything I needed to know about being a monster. Thank you for showing me exactly what not to become. Victor's fury exploded. He slammed Lucian against a pillar hard enough to crack stone, his hand tightening until Lucian's face began to turn blue. Elara couldn't watch him die, couldn't feel him slip away through the bond. She moved without thinking, her hand closed around the silver dagger at James's belt. She crossed the crypt in 5 running steps, her human slowness an advantage. No one expected her to intervene. The blade sank into Victor's shoulder. He roared, releasing Lucian to spin toward her. His hand backhanded her across the face with force that sent her flying. She hit the ground hard, tasting blood. Interference. Victor bellowed. She's broken the law. Exile for the girl and she's not part of any house. Lady Corvus interrupted smoothly. The blood bond makes her independent. She can't be exiled for defending someone she's bound to. It's still interference, is it? Lord Ashenwood stepped forward, his scholarly face thoughtful. The law says no house member may interfere. But a blood-bonded companion exists outside house structure. Technically, she violated nothing. The conclave keeper frowned, considering. The law is ambiguous on this point. While they argued, Lucian had pulled himself upright. The distraction had given him precious seconds to recover. Elara felt it through the bond, a desperate plan forming. Dangerous and desperate. Trust me, he sent through the connection. Victor turned back to his son, fury distorting his features. Hiding behind humans now? How pathetic. Not hiding, Lucian said quietly. Learning. He moved, not with vampire speed, but with human cunning. He feinted left, drawing Victor's strike, then dropped low and drove his shoulder into his father's knee. The joint buckled. Even vampire ligaments had limits. Victor stumbled. Lucian surged upward, his hand closing around the silver dagger still embedded in Victor's shoulder. He drove it deeper, twisting. Silver against vampire flesh. Poison against poison. Victor screamed. Lucian didn't give him time to recover. 3 centuries of watching, learning, understanding his father's fighting style paid off in a flurry of calculated strikes. Not stronger, not faster, but smarter. Victor went down. Lucian's hand closed around his father's throat, mirroring the position from moments before. Yield. Never. Victor spat. Then die. Lucian's hand tightened. Die. And let your house tear itself apart without you. Die, knowing your son beat you with the very compassion you called weakness. Silence stretched through the crypt. Yield, Lucian repeated. Or I end this now. Finally, after a long moment, Victor's voice came out strangled. I yield. The conclave keeper stepped forward. Victor Silvermere has yielded. Lucian Blackthorn is victorious. The challenge is resolved. Lucian released his father and staggered back. Through the bond, Elara felt his triumph and his grief tangled together. He'd won, but the cost was written in every wound, every drop of blood. She crossed to him as he swayed, catching him before he fell. I kept my promise, he murmured against her hair. I came back to you. You did, she whispered. You did. Chapter 12. Dawn's Promise. 3 weeks after the conclave, Elara stood in Lucian's gardens, watching magical lights shift to mimic sunrise. The sanctuary had changed since Victor's defeat. The border wards hummed stronger now, reinforced by alliances Lucian had forged in the aftermath. Lady Corvus had sent craftsmen to strengthen the defenses. Lord Ashenwood had delivered ancient texts on blood magic and healing. Even House Crescent had offered a tentative treaty, seeking to learn from Blackthorn's unconventional methods. Victor had retreated to his estate, stripped of the right to challenge his son again. The conclave had ruled the matter settled. House Silvermere would not move against House Blackthorn without facing consequences from the other 6 houses, for the first time in 3 centuries. Lucian was truly free of his father's shadow, but freedom came with questions neither of them had answered. Alara heard him before she saw him, the bond singing awareness through her blood. She turned as Lucian emerged from the underground passages, moving easier now that the poison had finally cleared his system. "You're up early," he said, joining her among the night-blooming flowers. "Couldn't sleep? Too much thinking." She touched a pale blossom, its petals luminescent in the false dawn. Grace said Malcolm withdrew his accusations. That he claimed I'd been found innocent of all charges. He had encouragement. Lucian's voice held grim satisfaction. James paid him a visit. Explained that continuing to slander you would result in complications. Malcolm decided his reputation was worth more than revenge. "So I'm free." The words should have brought joy. Instead, they felt hollow. I could go back to the mortal world, rebuild my life, find a new position, start over. Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Through the bond, she felt his careful control, emotions locked behind walls. "You could," he agreed softly. "The bond wouldn't stop you. You'd still feel me, know when I'm near, but you could live a full mortal life, marry, have children, grow old. The bond doesn't prevent any of that, but you'd feel it all too." Alara turned to face him. "You'd feel me falling in love with someone else. Feel me aging while you stayed frozen. Feel me die." His jaw tightened. "I knew that risk when we formed the bond. Did you? Or did you think I'd choose to stay?" "I hoped," Lucian admitted, his amber eyes meeting hers. "But hope and expectation are different things. I won't trap you here out of obligation or gratitude, Alara. These past weeks, you've had time to see what this life truly is. Darkness and danger, immortals who view humans as lesser. An existence lived in shadows, always watching for threats. If you want to leave, I'll help you build a new life. I'll ensure you're protected, wealthy enough to be independent. You'll never want for anything, except you." The words hung between them, stark and honest. "Except me," he echoed. Alara moved closer, her hand rising to rest against his chest, where his heart beat its slow, deliberate rhythm. "What if I don't want a mortal life anymore? What if I've seen the darkness and decided I'd rather face it with you than face false sunshine alone?" Hope flickered across his features, quickly suppressed. "You'd give up mortality? Children, aging naturally, the chance at a normal life? I'd give up an illusion." Her other hand cupped his face. "I had a normal life, Lucian. It was full of men like Malcolm who saw me as property of society, that valued my compliance over my happiness. You've given me more genuine freedom in 3 weeks than I had in 24 years, freedom that comes with danger. Victor may have yielded, but he's not gone. There will be other threats, other houses testing our boundaries. You'd be choosing a life of vigilance. I'd be choosing you." She rose on her toes, her lips a breath from his. "I'd be choosing to stand beside you as an equal, not a dependent. I'd be choosing immortality so I don't have to leave you." After a handful of mortal years, Lucian's control finally shattered. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "You're certain? Once you're turned, there's no reversing it. You'll be vampire, bound to darkness and blood, and then you." Alara finished. "I know what I'm choosing. I've watched you these weeks, seen how you lead with honor instead of fear, how you protect without possessing. If becoming like you means becoming someone who fights for what's right, even when it's dangerous, then yes, I'm certain." Through the bond, she felt his emotions crash over him, joy and fear and love so deep it took her breath away. "When?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Tonight," she smiled. "Unless you need more time to prepare?" "I've had 3 centuries to prepare." Lucian drew back enough to look at her properly. "But you need to understand what it means. The transformation is painful. You'll die as a human and wake as something other. Your senses will overwhelm you at first. The hunger will be difficult to control. And you'll be bound to me even more deeply, maker and fledgling, until you're old enough to stand alone. How long? A century, perhaps 2. His smile was rueful. "I'm a patient teacher." "Then we'd better start now." Alara pulled him down for a kiss, pouring everything she felt through the bond and the contact. I don't want to waste another mortal night when I could be spending centuries with you. That evening, as true darkness fell over the sanctuary, Alara lay in Lucian's bed, surrounded by candles and witnesses. Grace held her hand, tears streaming down the young woman's face. James stood solemn at the foot of the bed. Thomas waited by the door. Lucian sat beside her, his wrist already bleeding from a carefully placed cut. Last chance, he said quietly. Once you drink, once your heart stops, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. Alara took his wrist, pressing it to her lips. Only forward. With you. She drank. The blood was cold and rich, tasting of copper and power and 300 years of existence. It burned down her throat, spreading through her veins like liquid fire. She felt her heartbeat quicken, then slow, then stumble. Lucian's other hand cradled her head. That's enough. Now you have to let go. Let yourself slip away. Trust that you awake again. Alara released his wrist, her vision already dimming. The last thing she saw was his face, fierce with love and determination. The last thing she felt through the bond was his absolute certainty. I'll be here when you wake. Forever, if you'll have me. Then darkness took her, and Alara Ashford died. 3 nights later, Alara opened eyes that saw in perfect darkness. She woke to Lucian's face, unchanged, but somehow more vivid. Every detail sharp and clear, the gold flecks in his amber eyes. The faint scar on his jaw from some centuries-old fight. The way his lips curved when he smiled. Welcome back, he whispered. Alara's new senses flooded her with sensation. She could hear hearts beating throughout the sanctuary, Grace in the kitchen, Thomas in the library, James patrolling the borders. She could smell blood and life, and the peculiar coldness that marked her as other now. But most of all, she felt Lucian. The bond had deepened, transformed into something richer. She didn't just sense his emotions, she knew them as intimately as her own. How do you feel? He asked. Alara considered. Her body felt different, stronger, faster, humming with potential. The hunger lurked at the edges of her awareness, manageable but present. And underneath it all, a sense of rightness she'd never experienced as a mortal. Free, she said finally. I feel free. Lucian helped her sit up, his movements careful. The hunger will be difficult at first. We'll start with small amounts. Teach you control. You'll need to learn to move in the mortal world without drawing attention. To manage your strength. She kissed him, silencing the lecture. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. I have eternity to learn, Alara said. And a very patient teacher. Centuries together. Lucian agreed, wonder in his voice. I'd given up hoping for that. Then it's time to start hoping again. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together, both of them cold now, both of them immortal. For tonight, for tomorrow, for all the nights ahead. Through the bond, she felt his response before he spoke it aloud. For all the nights ahead, Lucian echoed. Together, above them, in the mortal world. Dawn was breaking, but in the sanctuary of House Blackthorn, 2 vampires sat in comfortable darkness, planning an eternity neither of them had to face alone. The story of the wounded heroine and the vampire who'd saved her had become something else entirely, a partnership, an alliance, a love that would outlast centuries, and in the shadows where monsters were supposed to lurk, they'd found something humans rarely manage: true freedom, real choice, and a future built on trust instead of fear.